So you've finished your book, you finished your manuscript, you wrote the end at the end of the Word document, and you would like to know, how does it go from a Word document into one of these bad boys? And that's actually a very complex question to answer, but it's a question that I get really frequently on the channel, either through personal messages or very often through my Facebook personal messages, sometimes on my websites or through email. What do I do now that I have this completed manuscript? Well, what you should know is that you've completed 2 of the 4 steps of book creation. You're halfway there. The first step is usually planning. Second step is drafting, which you've just completed when you write the end. The third phase is revision, the revision phase, which is the hardest one to really nail down and for me to give a lot of advice on. And then the fourth phase is going to be publication, which is either some very technical things if you're self-publishing or some very general advice if you're going to try to go through the traditional route. In the revision phase, you're usually trying to take your completed manuscript and turn it into something that's ready for prime time, ready for the public to read, turn it into something that readers are going to like, fix any problems, any kind of style problems. And there's a lot of ways you can go about it. You can hire an editor to do most of that work for you, somebody who's experienced with that, to point out, you're not using the right style here, or you should change this, or you should add this, or you should cut all this stuff, and sort of present that plan to you, and then you make those changes, make any other revision changes you need to have it proofread, and then eventually get it to press. But if this is your first book, and indeed most of the people who contact me with this question, this is the first book that they've completed, I'd like to give some additional advice and suggest some additional things. So the first one is, I think you should consider taking your manuscript and putting it into a drawer for a little while. And don't think about it, just start writing another book, because chances are the first book you write is going to suck. And it's going to be bad enough, the first book that you write, that it's going to take a lot of work in that phase 3, the revision phase, to turn it into the work of art that you actually want it to be. And chances are you're going to grow more as a writer, and you'll actually spend less time and have less headaches if you just start a new book right away and just start writing the next book and get that next book done. The experience of actually creating the entire book, if you do a second one, you go back and look at your first one, you'll have a better idea of what you need to fix without having to pay any editor a dime to try to tell you stuff. Another option is, people go to writing groups, they trade manuscripts with other writers who are trying to get better at their craft, and this person will read it and make some suggestions and tell you stuff, and then you can kind of work on your craft as part of a writing group. That's something a lot of people do. I personally haven't found a whole lot of value in them, but the biggest value I found is just in practice, is just doing it. So the first 2 books I wrote were probably not very good. The first book I wrote for sure I feel like was not good. Second book I wrote was way better. The third book I wrote, I felt like I finally got it right. I finally figured out everything I needed to do with the structure, with my style of writing, with the characterization. Everything kind of came together to make a pretty decent little book, and I'm pretty proud of it. That's Muramasa Blood Drinker, my samurai fiction novel. And after that, I could continue to experiment and alter what I was doing. But just the practice of putting the old book away and writing several more good ones, by the time I went back to that first manuscript, I realized just how lacking it was. If I had handed that manuscript off to an editor and paid them hundreds of dollars, maybe thousands of dollars, to rip it all apart and tell me what was wrong with it, I probably wouldn't have gotten any better at what I was doing, or really known what was so wrong, or maybe even been in opposition to what the editor had to say in their opinion. Now, though, it's like I'm the editor and I'm looking at a book that someone else wrote, because that person who wrote it was me from like 4 or 5 years ago, not me now. So it really is like a different person, and I can look at it and I can be a lot more objective about the work. And I have the skill on the other side to be able to recognize what I need to fix. So that is a suggestion that I'd like to sort of present to you guys who are first timers as far as the book stuff is. Just try writing another book, and then without even thinking about the first one or trying to fix it. And then when you go back to the first one, you'll have a better idea of what you need to fix or what was good about it, and you can save yourself a lot of time and money and headache without having to go through endless agent queries to eventually get nowhere. Or you can begin that agent query process, try a revision and try querying agents and stuff. And while you're doing that, be writing your second book. You should always be trying to work on that next project or planning that next project so that you can get a little bit better at your craft. And that's really my advice for first-time writers for getting into that phase 3, which is to really start over again at phase 1 with a new project, because the planning and the execution phase, the better you do those, the less work you have to do in the revision phase. The easier it gets to revise and then publish your work. So that's my advice. Hopefully it's useful for you. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you want to see and what you want to hear. I'm always appreciative of it, and I will see you guys next time.